thank you all so much for joining us on this special discussion around equality in the boardroom, a hot topic today in corporate conversations, and also to address really how more and more women can aspire for those boardroom positions and make it to the top. Who better than this power-packed panel today to discuss some of that with us? So let's start off with really what it takes to become part of a boardroom conversation as a woman leader, to find a path, to inculcate those qualities and to really get there. So Renu, let me begin with you. Where does one actually start climbing that ladder?
Okay, so our story is very different from the company I belong to. When it was not mandatory to have women on the board, we had one 30 years ago. Our senior vice president sales and marketing was on the board of Indian Hotels Company Limited. And the boards I went on to, again, it was not mandatory, so this just tells you what our company is all about. So yes, you have to demonstrate leadership skills at what you do, because it's a fiduciary responsibility. And if it's a fiduciary responsibility, you take accountability for all the stakeholders, minority and majority, and you have to conduct yourself as any normal leader would. So in our company, especially when you're taking an executive leadership role, you have to demonstrate all the leadership skills that are required to be a good leader, being ethical, carrying people with you, being collaborative, keeping a very sharp eye on performance. So we didn't, I'll say that about me, when I took up my job, I didn't think I wanted to be on the board. I just wanted to do my job right.
Anjali, do you feel that, once the laws changed recently, about a year or so ago, and more women were required to be represented on Indian boards, that was taken seriously by companies here? Have we seen tokenism towards that, or have we actually seen more opportunities created?
So when the Companies Act was passed in 2013, there was a usual issue around, is this reservation? And most of us have gotten to where we are despite being women, or frankly, having been lucky enough, and I'll share that later, in companies early on in our life where you didn't think about your gender particularly. So when the Companies Act was passed, there was this criticism that people are putting women who are related, mothers, sisters, wives, etc. on the board. My view on that is that's also okay, because it gave those women a seat at the table and a voice in the game. Then when the Kotak committee recommended that you should have at least one independent woman director, that's even better. So in the last, I would say 15 years that I've been tracking statistics in this space, we were probably at about 3.5% of women board members. Today we are close to 20. And if it took legislative action to do that, that's also okay. I don't think it's tokenism today. And you know what, even if it starts with a check the box exercise because you need to have that independent woman, that's also okay.
Sonal, what do you think?
I think to Renu's point, one of the main things is to let people know what your goals are, that you aspire to be on a board, that you want to be on a board. Because a lot of people just make assumptions about who you are and where you are in life and what you want to do. So I think it's important to state your goals like any other career goals that you might have, that this is one of them, and that helps you get there.
So why do you feel women are apprehensive about aspiring to sort of move further on the corporate ladder? Is it because of the commitment involved? Is it because they feel that those positions are not open to them? Why is that apprehension still there?
I'm not sure it's an apprehension. I think women like to speak from a position where they are very confident about what they know already from domain expertise or knowledge. Men tend to be a little bit more aggressive or a little bit more avant-garde in sort of taking a punt or putting themselves out there. And those are sort of gender biases that we've grown up with, and which takes us a little bit of time to break through. But I don't think aspirationally there's a difference. It's a style issue in terms of how you put yourself out there.
Okay. Farzana, what do you think? And taking from what Anjali said as well, while that's a valid point, on the other hand, do you feel sometimes that creates a different impression if a woman on a board is not very active, is only because many times independent directors are there primarily just to kind of be present and they're not playing a very active executive role. Does that also then dampen the impression of how much women bring to the table?
I think it's very important for women to be on the board. I don't know how many of you have followed the news, But while we are celebrating the International Women's Day, in Latin America, people are still fighting for female infanticide, right? So for a lot of women around the globe, it's a matter of survival. Is the right to live, is the right to exist in safety, even the right to go to work and feel safe about it. Collectively, if each of us in this room are economically powerful and play roles in boards, you are a part of the narrative. You create the narrative. LATAM is burning, the women are getting killed there because the police don't think it's important. So putting an FIR against rape or kill goes way down than theft in a rich man's house. That will only change if we are powerful. Power comes with economy. Power comes when I drive a $10 billion business. Then I am given a platform to make the policies that I would want to make. Otherwise, the men are making the policies, the men are making the institutions. Some are fabulous and some come with their myopic view. Unless each of us hold resources, there is no change in civil society that will come. But this is our time and this is the platform where we need to have representation in board, because that's the only way we'll create organizations which are fit for all of us. Otherwise, the men are deciding how the institutions should run. We have worked, we have reached here, and it is our time to contribute. So I'm extremely a strong feminist who thinks you should have 50%. I was so very happy with Unilever. I wrote to the CEO, I wrote to the chairman. I think it's a very, very important aspect.
I mean, from all your experience, I mean, do you see that happening more and more? I mean, what's the proportion of men on boards today?
In fact, to her point, I think this regulation has certainly helped all of us, because at least brought the attention of shining the torch on women.
And
so we have
They
increased.
statistically have gone up,
Anjali said, the numbers have increased. And people are actually seeing value, what is being brought on the table. And if you see a lot of companies, except some of the government companies, you have more than 2 to 3 ladies on the board. And with the diversity ratios changing in organizations, we'll see more and more of it. I mean, India is nascent. If you take Norway, you take UK, it's 40 to 30%, Norway being at 40 and UK being at 30. There's certainly a huge opportunity, and yes, women add a lot. They do ensure that they're seen as role models. The organization is perceived to be progressive. They bat for the women. They're standing up for the women, because women who are on the board always ask questions of how many women employees do you have. They are sounding boards for some of the senior executives. However, I would like to add here, it's not just about the board. I think it's also about the leadership in organizations. The board definitely is very critical, but if you have 50% women in your leadership team, that just creates a path for women to get onto the board. So I think it's very important, and I do see this happening in a lot of companies. The banks have been very good at it. They've had more women. Recently Unilever has, and very recently the Tata Group, you're seeing a lot more women. I mean, when I used to go to Bombay House in the past, you only saw one group of people who were women. Today you're seeing a lot more women in different floors. Of course, it's also industry specific. If you take manufacturing, there are definitely less women, but you take services, you take my business, you take the airlines, you take consumer, there is definitely a growth. So I think it's a good sign, because also there are a lot more women in the workforce today.
Okay. Radhika, let me get you in here.
So you need more women, not just for any reason. So I come from asset management, and unfortunately, while banking has had a large number of women, we don't in asset management. I mean, we have 45 mutual fund companies, and with no pride, one mutual fund CEO. I think you need women on boards and in leadership for a very simple reason, that women represent 50% of the consumption population. If we are asset management businesses, 50% of the investor base is women, and 50% of the consumption base is women. In fact, women probably influence globally 70 to 80% of consumption decisions, because when a woman is in power, she not only thinks for herself, she probably thinks for her parents, her children, and the extended family. So the Prime Minister of Finland made this statement, and she's 34, she runs an all-female cabinet, and she said, one day this concept of having a young woman cabinet in leadership, today it looks strange to the media, but it has to look normal because our institutions have to mirror our society, and our society has generational diversity and it has gender diversity. So ultimately, your institutions have to mirror society, and policies need to be formed with a women lens in mind. There was a really interesting discussion that some of you may have followed on social media that was happening last night on Women's Day. And every Women's Day, they're like, let's come up with some diversity policies. So there was this policy about giving 2 days of menstrual leave. Anjali, I can see you making faces. I mean, it was great. And this was the women-friendly movement, and it was a man politician who had proposed this policy. And yes, most of us went on social media and said, what is this going to do? This is just going to tell companies, especially SMEs, it's more expensive to employ a woman. Already they are worried about 6-month paternity leave. Already they are worried that after 8 o'clock you have to give women security. Already they are worried, what if she runs away after getting married? Now there's this 2-day leave. And if a woman had to think about this policy, she would say, people who need the leave will take the leave. Or why don't we put a small room in the office so you can rest if you have a problem? So women need to be there so we can take decisions for ourselves that are logical for us.
I'm actually going to read a quote from one of my absolute heroes. She's the first female US Supreme Court Chief Justice, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, also known as RBG. She said, women belong in all places where decisions are being made. It shouldn't be that women are the exception. And that is so fundamental and so profound. We are 50% of the world's population. How does it even make sense, economic sense, financial sense, social sense, to not have half your population participate in decision making? And many of the troubles we are seeing in the world today are because we are excluding much of that 50% of the world from sensible decision making. There's actually numerous studies, and I'm not going to be an absolute nerd and bore you with all those studies, but there are numerous studies that show that women actually negotiate for fairer and more sustainable outcomes. They make the best international trade negotiators because they're not looking for a win-lose outcome, they're looking for a win-win outcome. I don't know whether it's biology or sociology or evolution and what's made, but that's how it is. So if you just go with empirical data, it makes sense, absolute practical sense to include the women, 1. 2 is, if you again go back to, say, the example of Norway. Norway is a very interesting anecdote. So the parliament came out with saying, companies, listed companies need to have 40% women independent directors. So the usual stuff which we have seen in India and corporate world around the world is, but there aren't enough women. And then someone reminded them that, guys, look around, 50% female population. You can't say there aren't enough women, find them. Year went by, 2 years went by, 3 years went by, and they finally came back and said, if you do not comply, you will have to delist. And more importantly, boards cannot remunerate themselves if they are not in compliance. There was 100% compliance within 1 year. So what gets measured gets done, and negative financial consequences generally work.
There's this whole movement around ESG being important for companies, environmental, social governance, and one of the big parts of social is having gender diversity. So when you tell companies that you have to be ESG compliant, otherwise your investors will not look at you, believe me, everyone will rush to get the ESG compliance certificate. So when it is in the economic interest of a company to have women on boards, they will definitely have women on boards. Finished.
Anjali, in terms of also how women carry themselves in the boardroom, and I think it's important to discuss that because, a lot of women are criticized for being too aggressive. If you're not assertive enough, then they say that you're too soft and, you're not exerting power or you're intimidated. I mean, what's the win-win here? I mean, all of you are so elegant and you seem to have it all under control, but how would you sort of describe it to someone else?
This is not a point of pride, but just a point of fact. I was the only woman in my lab at ISRO. As a young graduate engineer trainee, you didn't even think whether you're a female or a male. You just were there and you were trying to do reasonably interesting work. Then I joined McKinsey in New York doing FIG strategy, so financial institutions. Most of my teams were men. Most of my client teams were men. But interestingly enough, and I'm now going to date myself, but even in the mid-90s, if you did your work well, at least at that stage in life, no one really cared. Or at least the firm that I was in, nobody really cared. It's only later, when I think things start getting competitive with your peers and so on and so forth, that gender starts playing a role. Life needs change. So one of the issues that women had and have and continue to have is that your key years when you're building a career are also exactly the same key years when you're building a life and a family. And nature and biology have predicated that only the female can bear children. But you have to remember, it's not a life-threatening disease. It's not a debilitating disability. It's a short period of time. Babies are born, they get on with it, and it's only birthing and nursing that women have to do. Childcare, there's nothing that says only women can do childcare. So I think there is all of that. Now, I did not answer your question about boardroom conduct. I think you have to check your gender in at the door. There's a fiduciary responsibility, Renu mentioned it. Be yourself and do your job. And if folks insist on putting you in a box that says she is a woman, and by the way, I've heard this, and it's very annoying, but it's true. They'll say, this is our woman director. Yeah. Then I say, oh, this is our woman director. And I say, well, this is our man director.
They actually say that?
This is our
diversity. They actually say that?
No, they say this is diversity.
This is our diversity. Yeah.
Oh my
And
God.
I'm looking sitting there, very young diversity.
Even better, young diversity. 2 boxes checked.
Yeah.
No, I'm not. I'm 22 years working.
I'm 15,
I'm an astrophysicist. I have earned my place to be there. How can you look at the... And it is always said out of love, but also not very patronizing. So pretty, no? And I'm like, how can you talk like that? Also, fundamentally, because I started working before, 98, very different world out there. I saw, even, you're going to the Ivy League colleges, men are told to win. Women are told not to lose. When a VC or a funding, last year, less than 1.5% funding went to any female-led startups. So I serve on a couple of boards in the US and in Europe, where this is something I'm very, very, as I said, this is my personal legacy. What I do in career is one thing, but this is something I hope, inshallah, one day my family is proud of. But this is what I work on. When a VC or an investor is talking to an entrepreneur or to a CEO, a man, to a male entrepreneur, they will say, so what's your profitability, what are you looking at, how is your revenue going to look like, what's your 5-year plan, are you looking at global expansion? As soon as a female entrepreneur comes, what are the risks? What are the costs? How will you cut cost? Besides saying, take a male co-founder because you'll get more funding. So I've been part of this conversation, and as a very young person, this was very traumatic because all the people sitting there have worked very hard to be there. They don't deserve that shit. And storytelling is another thing that women entrepreneurs don't do well. So they can't raise fund. So for me, this platform of reaching wherever I reach, inshallah, in my career, is to use that and get equality in building institutions. I think any nation would become a developed nation. Every time I go saying, oh, she's from the third world country, and she's this young brown lady who's doing very well in a services company. That's an introduction I've got. It feels very nice on hindsight, this is our home, these are our people to say. But when you're standing there alone with a bunch of men who anyway don't want you to be there because they're colleagues and they think you don't deserve to be there, you're also facing customers who say that to your colleagues. So the way I counteracted is that you have to be the most valuable player in your team. You have to outperform and out hard work everyone. There is no other way of doing it. if your performance is better than who you are, how you look, whether you're ugly, pretty, small, tall, doesn't give a shit. But it's very important. I think women don't stay the course. We think that we make this much wealth for our family, I will sit back. It's our first to take this forward, guys. This is our time in history.
So can I add something here? I don't know, maybe my experience is very different because I think the women to woman narrative started very early in our company, perhaps.
I love the Taj, by the way.
Yeah, I love it too.
You work there. I have very personal reasons.
Yeah.
My grandmother and grandfather both sets got married. My parents got married in the Taj. I got married in the Taj. And my children will literally be raised in the swimming pool. Oh, so yes, this is, I love the Taj.
That's the love for our brand. Thank you so much. The thing is, because we had a woman recruit us, I don't want to say when I was recruited, but I'll say it now, 30 years ago, that's where we got our confidence and a seat at the table. Of course, at that time, there was no boards. I mean, we were very young. And if you take in the department that I look after, we are 52% women. It's because of the legacy, and that's why they say it's very critical to have women leaders, because they encourage you, they nurture you, and fortunately then the whole organization starts working like that, you know. And I think that's the role we have to play. Of course, the board is very critical, but even if you're a senior management, where you can be the power to influence the entire organization, you automatically get the light on you. And you don't do it because you want the light on you, you do it because it's good for your organization. So that's what I believe in, and I'm sure that I have a lot of colleagues here in the room, and most of us started our life in this company with one woman leader who was championing the cause.
Absolutely. So now I want to get you in here. Yeah.
I don't think men have it that easy either, because in any corporate environment where people are fighting for the best jobs or trading ring of an investment bank, for example, there are alpha males who are pushing other men out. It's easier for them to push women out because you're visibly different, but they're doing it to everybody. So it's not always personal to be because you're a woman. And that to Anjali's point, when you get in, by the time you're in the boardroom, when you're invited there, you have to check in at the door. Some of the things we do when we're running searches for boards is actually check if it's the first time female director first time that they're hiring a female director, are they ready for it? Is there some amount of conditioning that, an old promoter or somebody who's not used to this, they need to make a little bit of a journey because of the way, particularly in our country and certainly all over the world from your experiences, people look at women and behave in a certain way around women. Yeah. And they just need to occasionally just be told or just to see that what you're doing is inappropriate and it's negating what I've done, where I've come from, all of my accomplishments, because this is all you're seeing. And sometimes it's as easy or as simple as pointing it out to them. And of course, sometimes it's a much tougher journey in terms of, battling with deep-rooted issues, etc.
If you had to give somebody a promotion or a position, and if you had a male and female, both that merited that opportunity equally, would you pause for a moment to consider the woman to create, for the fact that perhaps that person needs a bit more of a push, that person needs a little bit more of a chance, or would you view it completely neutrally?
I would say yes for us.
Yes.
Because at least in asset management where we are, and I think Renu made a very pertinent point, if you look at executive leadership, a lot of these conversations are about CEOs, executive leadership, but that is an outcome. You need a mid-management pipeline. And as Anjali said, a lot of your dropouts happen at the mid-management pipeline. And if I look at asset management, for instance, because I know that industry, if you were to ask me, can there be a female CEO in the next 3-4 years? I would be hard pressed to say yes, because if you look at the next line, which is chief investment officers or chief sales officers, there are probably 2 people I know at best. That, in my view, is a bad outcome. So today, if there was a chance and there was a man and a woman and both were equal on merit, would we push up a woman? I most definitely think so, because at where we are, we are not HUL. you need some reservation to take it up. At least it will build awareness. So at our stage, you need to.
I would.
Yes, okay, that's 2, and I see, yes, 3. With that, thank you all for coming. Thank you. Thank you.